And we're back. Back at it. So, we're continuing on with psychological disorders. Alright. So, psychological disorders. They are mental disorders. And mental disorders are disorders that involve the mind. And they can be known as mental illness, psychiatric illness, abnormalities of the mind that can cause distress or disability. And they sometimes can shorten someone's lifespan, such as suicide or other negative effects. The definition of distress. Distress is a negative type of stress that builds over time and is bad for your body. It happens when you perceive a situation to be too threatening to you in some way and your body can't be primed to respond to the threat. Eustress is a positive type of stress that helps you when you perceive a situation as challenging but motivating. Eustress is usually enjoyable. So, distress is stressing throughout your entire life that you can't handle. Eustress is like working out at the gym. Neurostress is a neutral type of stress. Neutral happens when you're exposed to something stressful but doesn't actively or just it affects you. For example, news about a natural disaster on the other side of the world may be stressful, but your body doesn't perceive the stress as good or bad. Okay. Major public health problems affect the higher function of the brain, including cognition, emotion, conscious behavior. So there's two models that we'll look at today. Biomedical, which looks only at the biological components and the physical abnormalities. So you're trying to look for a mechanism that can be treated by using some type of drug. Where a biopsychosocial model, it looks at both biology, psychological, and social factors that can cause the mental disorder. Difficult to categorize mental disorders because there's no brain tests, scans, blood, and tests. That is mostly made clinically by symptoms and signs. Time course, risk factors, epidemiology. So there's two types of classification systems, which is the International Classification Disease 10, which is used by the international world, or in the US we use DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, to classify mental illnesses based on different symptoms present and the criteria necessary to get meet. And then, according to the National Institute of Health, each year in the U.S., about 25% meet the criteria for one mental disorder, and 6% will have a serious mental illness that causes disability, at least once in their lifetime. Some people have more than one mental disorder at times, which is called comorbidity. So, the categories of mental disorders. There's a number of types of mental disorders with overlapping features, not due usually to medication, drugs, or other medical conditions. And they generally be displayed differently based on culture. For example, like schizophrenia is less displayed in second world countries compared to third or first world. Because first world, they look like they're not as part of the society and they're looked like left as outsiders. In the second world, they're used as like a necessary person in society that they have to have jobs. And mental disorders usually cause distress or disability on an individual's aspects, both mentally and physiologically. And we'll go through the DSM-5. There's 20 top level categories. There are other categories for each as well. Neurodevelopment disorders involve distress or disability due to abnormalities in the development of the nervous system, includes intelligence disabilities, autism, and ADHD. Autism spectrum disorder is characterized by a variety of issues related to the social communication abilities. The first symptoms of the disorder typically involve delayed language development and unusual communication patterns. Specific learning disabilities. All specific types removed from the DSM-5. Specific learning disorder dyslexia is characterized by problems with accurate or fluent word recognition, poor decoding, and poor spelling. So they're not included in DSM-5. So dyscalculia is a math learning disorder, and dysgraphia is a writing disorder. So they're not considered as mental disorders. Neurocognitive disorders is a loss of cognitive or other function of the brain. After the nervous system has developed, big categories within this is delirium, which is reversible episodes of cognitive or higher problems may cause drug abnormalities and blood infection. Dementia and its milder forms are irreversible and progressive. Sleep-wake disorders result in distress and disability with sleep-related issues, including insomnia and breathing-related sleeping disorders, abnormal behaviors. Anxiety disorders is distress and disability from abnormal worrying and fear. Some are specific to certain stimuli like phobias, while they're specific to other generalized anxiety disorder. Panic disorder involves panic attacks, which is intense anxiety. Social anxiety disorder is a false cognition leading to a fear of humiliation. Embarrassment, rejection, negative evaluation, or the rejection of others. Selective mutism is an anxiety disorder characterized by difficult speaking in social situations. Individuals develop normative in terms of their language. General anxiety disorder includes experience excessive and persistent worrying anxiety regarding many different spheres of life, cause distress, impairment, or maladaptive behavior. Depressive disorders is distress or abnormal negative mood. Mood refers to a long-term emotional state. Mood is not emotion. Mood is more than long-term. Mood is more long-term, not necessarily related to events. Mood is subjective to experience person has with their experience. Mood is how someone feels, such as sad, becomes affective, how mood is displayed to others. Hopelessness, loss of enjoyment in activities, high risk of suicide. Bipolar and related disorders is abnormal negative mood, but these may have periods of abnormal positive mood called mania. Mania is characterized by little sleep, talking quickly, making bad decisions due to impaired judgment, making bad decisions based on bad assessment of risk, can lead to social and legal problems. Schizophrenia involves distress and disability from psychosis. Psychosis involves delusions, which are fixed, false beliefs not explained by experience/culture. One's thoughts are controlled by someone else. Hallucinations is sensory perception when there's no stimuli present. With psychosis, disorganized speech can occur and negative symptoms can also occur, such as decreased emotion expression, decreased motivation, decreased social behavior. Schizophrenia has many of these features, while other psychosis disorders have some. So, trauma stress-related disorders is distress due to a traumatic event, is the mood, emotional behavior abnormalities. Example is PTSD, common after wars or other traumatic events. Substantial related or addictive disorders are disorders related to substance use or any other addictive behaviors like gambling. Personality disorders are related to personality and involve long-term mental behavioral features that are characterized of a person. Huge spectrum of personality types and considered acceptable from a culture. Personality disorders involve one outside those accepted of society. Cluster A, B, and C. So A is odd and eccentric. B is intense, emotional, and relationship. C is anxious, avoidant, and obsessive. So A is weird. So cluster A is awe. Cluster B is, how should we remember cluster B? Intense emotional relationship problems. Cluster B can be remembered to be BIP. Cluster C is CA. So cluster C is anxious, avoidant, obsessive. CAO, cow. Disruptive, impulsive control, and conductive disorders are distress disabilities from behaviors that are unacceptable to disrupt or impulse from someone's culture, and ability to control inappropriate behaviors. Obsessive compulsive related disorders distress disability from obsessions or compulsions. Obsessions are thoughts that occur involuntarily, often unwelcomed, occurred repeatedly. Compulsion are activity that one must do that are often related to obsession. Obsessions with hands being dirty, compulsion with washing them many times a day. Somatosymptom related disorders are symptoms that relate with the body, that someone believes that they're ill when they're not. They have no general medical condition. Feeding and eating disorders is distress and disability from behavior abnormalities related to food. Anorexia, bulimia, binge eating. Elimination disorders, haven't heard about this one. Elimination disorders is distress or disability from urination and defecation at inappropriate times or places. I haven't heard of that one. Interesting. Okay. Dissociative disorders is distress or disability due to identity or memory. We talked about that earlier. Like multiple personalities can lose memories. Sexual dysfunctions, distress or performance of sexual activity. Gender dysphoria, distress due to persons identifying as a different gender than society represents them. Must cause distress or disability. Paraphilic disorders, haven't heard of one. Just from having sexuality to unusual stimuli for a person's culture. Which cause distress? It has particularly people or a child who does not have decision-making capacity or proper consent. Other disorders is distress, disability from any that has the period of mental disorder causing distress or impairing some person's life. So, let's start with schizophrenia. So, schizophrenia is a disorder of the brain, but it has nothing to do with multiple personalities. It is a combination of both genetic and environmental. So, when your father has schizophrenia, it's likely that you could develop it. It's not always true, but you are at a more risk. These abnormalities in the brain can be picked off by abnormal brain scans and neurotransmitters. So, high dopamine causes schizophrenia. Or larger ventricles. That's what I learned in abnormal psychology. Antipsychotic meds reduce dopamine. None of the tests actually diagnose schizophrenia is diagnosed by clinical interviews. Why do we observe the patient? It causes changes in the patient's behavior. Behavioral changes can be changes in the way that they think or act. Difference in the way they think. Abnormal beliefs is delusions, or hearing or seeing things is hallucinations. So those are positive. Or disorganized speech is also. Difference in the way they act is isolate them socially, or disorganized, flat affect, lack emotion. Lots of changes that are different. 1% of people have schizophrenia, equally male and female. In fact, those who are 16 to 30-year-old. Males are affected at a younger age than females. Prodromal is period of time before schizophrenia symptoms are actually present. So in the prodromal phase, it's like the duration of a person's behavior and functioning. Some of the signs of schizophrenia once start to go downhill. Schooler suffers or work can suffer. Relations might suffer. Delusional ideas. People working against me is an example being developed. Prodromal leads to schizophrenia. Schizophrenia people have a higher risk of suicide, being homeless, or being a person in jail. Schizophrenia disorder recap. It's a brain disorder that is a neurodevelopment combination of genetics and environment. Can notice differences in brain scans, but diagnosed via clinical interview. Affects how people act and perceive by a prodromal period. Decrease in functioning. Social repercussion, it stops people in engaging in society. High risk of suicide. Incarceration. Haloperidol is an antipsychotic medicine used to treat. Don't know that one. So, the biological basis of schizophrenia. It's a common long-term mental disorder that causes a large amount of distress and disability. So, prototype of psychotic categories of disorders. Prototype of psychosis-specific abnormalities is cognition and perception of reality, hallucination, delusions. So, I'm not going to go through these too in depth because I have learned these through abnormal psychology last fall, but hallucinations are receiving stimuli without actually hearing or seeing anything there. Another positive is delusions, which is having false beliefs that are not explained by a person's culture, which are like bizarre beliefs that are illogical. Different types of delusion is persecution, that believe these people are against them, that they're plotting against them. Reference is their delusions of a neutral environment event that is believed to have a specific personal meaning. Like that someone is sending a signal to them through like a radio show. Delusion of grandeur is that they believe that they're famous or an important figure like Jesus, and that they have unusual powers. Delusion of control, proof that one's thoughts or actions are being controlled by the outside alien forces, or they feel like they're broadcasting their ideas. So, the rare disorder with both biological. There's three categories of symptoms. There's cognitive, positive, and negative. So, cognitive symptoms are abnormal attention, organization, and planning ability. So, disorganized thinking, slow thinking, difficulty. Interesting. We grouped cognitive symptoms with positive. Negative symptoms are blunt emotions, which is a lack of emotional expression, which is an inexpressive face, including flat voice, lack of eye contact, blank, restrictive, affective flattening, which is like reduced facial expressions. Lack of interest, of enthusiasm, problems of motivation, lack of self, which is ovulation, where they'll just lay in their bed and they have no motivation to do, like clean the house, for example. Seems lack of interest in the world. So they're socially withdrawn, they just stay in their house, they don't want to interact with others. Speech difficulties and abnormalities, inability to carry a conversation, that's like related to disorganized speech, logia. So positive symptoms of psychosis is hallucination and delusions that we talked about earlier. There's also canatotic schizophrenia, where they're acting extreme behavior, where they're just frozen, they don't speak, they don't move, irregular behavior, or they're catonically froze. Our understanding of the cause again is very limited. We believe it's high dopamine levels, but there's also theories that there's physical abnormalities observed in the brain, like larger ventricles. Like the fluid really are enlarging. That's the ventricles I was talking about. Cerebral cortex seems to have a decreased size. Theirs have to do with cognitive perception and abnormality. Organization of the cerebral cortex is particularly in frontal is disturbed. Based on activity studies, seem to be in the same area. Abnormalities. Abnormal development of the brain is most likely what leads to this disease. Some features of schizophrenia have dopamine levels increased, which we talked about. Also, the mesocortical limbic pathways upset, which regulates dopamine production by the substantia one. We already talked about the mesolimbic. So causes is genes, physical stress during pregnancy, and psychosocial factors like negative family. Poverty is the link. Causality is not well known. The biological basis of depression. Okay. So depression depends on like serotonin. So depression is a major depressive disorder. Major cause of distress is disability, death from suicide. Prototypes is disorder category of depressive disorders. Related symptoms of depressive moods is feeling of hopelessness, loss of interest, so anhedonia. Our understanding of the cause of major depression is limited. No consistent abnormalities in the brain, but scans can have suggested functional abnormalities in brain. Areas of abnormal activity involve the frontal lobe and limbic system. Decreased activity in the frontal lobes and increased activity in the limbic system shows a role in regulation of emotions and response. Stress hormones like cortisol are also increased. It's unclear which abnormalities of stress hormones are caused and which cause affected the disease. So, schizophrenia involves raphe nuclei, which promotes serotonin release, so it reduces serotonin, which is the locus course which sends along to norepinephrine. It supplies dopamine. So we can use medications that affect serotonin and dopamine. Monoamine oxidase increases the amount of monoamines in the synapse. Like monoamines include adrenaline, norepinephrine, serotonin. Another new idea may be an abnormality in neuroplasticity, brain changes in response to experience. When unclear if neuroplasticity is abnormal as a cause or effect. Strength of information efficiency is how flow changes or connections change. Aspects of neuroplasticity appears to be abnormal in animals or major depressive disorder. So this may involve genetics and called risk of developing a response. Psychological factors can also be linked to major depressive, such as child abuse, stressful events. So likely a combination of both biological and psychosocial factors. So the biopsychosocial factor is best at explaining it. So, anxiety disorders and obsessive compulsive disorder, they're usually linked together, but they're different. So generalized anxiety disorders describes a person is in a general state is tense and uneasy to decrease its function through life. They don't eat well or sleep deprived. So that's like 6 months. Identify physical as eyelids, twitching eyelids, trembling, fidgeting. Population affects women 2/3 are women. Sources of anxiety is unclear. Can identify the cause of stress and it can be diagnosed with fit or identified it can cause. Cause of high blood pressure and other bodily symptoms. Usually has depression alongside as comorbidity. Panic disorder, sudden bursts of sheer panic, intense panic attacks, my response to any stimuli related to operant conditioning. Panic attacks are response to situations typically don't work at that level. The irregular panic response. There are physical symptoms as well. Phobias are irrational, afraid of specific objects or specific situations. Their focus anxiety can be deliberating, which impacts the living of life. Tends to form a pattern. People tend to have phobias of specific types of things. So generally associated with fear of animals, insects, bloods, heights, or enclosed spaces by avoiding the source of their phobia. Social phobias fear different social situations, not as easy to avoid. Shyness or intense fear of being scrutinized by others. People avoid talking to people or places where they might be judged. OCD, characterized by obsession and compulsions. Obsessions are unwanted repetitive thoughts. Compulsions are unwanted repetitive actions. So obsession is like you're getting these repetitive thoughts that you don't want. Like, let's say, what's an obsession? That I need to clean my shoes over and over again because they're always dirty when they're just been cleaned. Or compulsion is you actually cleaning them. They can interfere with everyday life. For normal people, once you perform an action, the worry goes away. For them, it doesn't. So it's like that loop of satisfaction not being completed. Comments such as dirty, bad future are examples. Remember, you must invade your everyday life, and the sessions are extreme. Common compulsions are washing, check doors, movement rituals. 2 to 3% of people are affected, typically teens and young adults. PTSD. When a person has lingering memories and nightmares about a past event that impacts them in daily life. Haunting bad memories, repeated nightmares, include physical symptoms of insomnia. Have triggers that lead to the disorder. Soldiers coming home from war is an example, or some other trauma event. Described as PTSD persists for over 4 weeks, so you need a month for diagnosis. Acronym: post-traumatic stress disorder is a traumatic events we experience, avoidance, unable to function, month or more symptoms, arousal increased. This isn't as bad as the 20 symptoms I had to memorize for my abnormal class. Repression memories is memories that are hypothesized memories of unconsciously blocked due to the memories being associated with high levels of stress or trauma. The theory postulates that even though the individuals cannot recall the memories, it may still be affecting them consciously. The existence of repressed memories is a controversial topic in psychology because some can be implemented by hypnosis. Some believe that they can be recovered. Dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder. Two or more distinct personalities exist in a single body, both identify have influence on the person's thoughts and behaviors. Two identities are distinct from each other. Each have their manners, emotional responses, distinct physical changes. Denial. Who have this disorder, people who have child abuse or other extreme life stressors. Perhaps develops under cases of extreme stress, which leads to a person's conscious awareness. How common is this disorder is extremely rare. Only popularized by news, usually fake or extreme cases, and movies. Controversy surrounds DID due to its rarity. For the following reasons: rare in North America, but even more rare in other parts. Some experience it as a social construct more than a disorder. Can a disorder be induced by therapists? Leading questions by therapists. Interesting. So, dissociative disorders are controversial. Okay. So, somatic symptom disorders and other disorders. Their medical conditions typically result in physical symptoms. Medical conditions also result in psychological symptoms. In this case, autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular diabetes. Mental disorders are that affect the mind, which we already talked about. In some mental disorders, the manifestation of physical symptoms can become a big deal. Mental disorders are exactly existing of physical conditions or directly lead to their own physical symptoms. Somatic symptom disorders are mental disorders manifesting in physical symptoms. Can be any symptom: wrist pain or generally feeling of fatigue. May or may not be able to explain what we see and may not be related to a physical condition. So it could be like the placebo effect that you're promoting the sickness. Most cause functional impairments. Stops thinking from going to school or enjoying life. Conversion disorder must look like a neurological symptoms only, like problems with speech, swallowing, seizures, paralysis. Neurological symptoms that we see are incompatible with any known neurological or mental condition. We cannot explain this symptom based on tests or clinical exam. Sometimes have a level of psychological stress or trauma event resulting in manifestation or neurological symptoms. The DSM-5 criteria for conversion disorder states that an individual must exhibit at least one symptom or altered voluntary motor or sensory function. Shows internal consistency with distress or impairment that cannot be explained by a mental or medical disorder. The ICD-10 categorizes by symptom type with weakness or abnormal movements, tremor, under specific symptom types. Factious disorders, patients want to be sick. So I don't know this one because we didn't cover it. Patients want to be sick. Patients will falsify their disease, their falsify signs of disease or illness to get a diagnosis. They might injure themselves, falsify tests, often called Munchausen syndrome, Munchausen by proxy, when one person makes another person look ill, so medical attention can be furthered. People do this in a sick role, not for money. Alright. My least favorite unit of abnormal psychology is personality disorders. I just didn't enjoy them. So, personality is how we experience the world and how we behave outwards. So, personality disorder marks deviations from how we expect the world to behave and how a person is experiencing the world. This difference leads to distress in functioning. This category is controversial. There's 10 personality disorders which are split up into 3 clusters. Cluster A, Cluster B, and Cluster C. Which we said Cluster A is weird because AW, like for all. Cluster B is dramatic, emotional, erratic, and Cluster C is CA, so anxiety or fear. There's overlap between the clusters. One person might have one type or multiple types of personality disorders. So Cluster A has 3 personality disorders: paranoid, schizoid, schizotypical. So paranoid is distrust or suspicion to others. Schizoid is similar to schizophrenia, but it's related to personality. They're emotionally detached from relationships and show little emotion. Schizotypical is odd beliefs or magical thinking. Cluster B is antisocial, little to no regard for others, commits crimes and shows no remorse. So they would say serial killers have antisocial personality disorder. Borderline is unstable relationships, emotions are unstable, variable self-image. BPD, which is over unstable. Histrionic are very well attention seeking, displays emotions outward, wears bright clothes. Narcissistic is huge egos, need for admiration, praise, grandiosity. So Dr. House on the TV show House has to show that it's on Netflix. So Narcissistic is Dr. House. Or Hitler's, his documentary is also on Netflix. Letter C is personality disorder. ADO. Avoidant, dependent, and obsessive. Avoidant is inhibited, feels inadequate, and tries to avoid putting together in a situation when they are criticized. Dependent is submissive and clingy. OCPD is not OCD. It's very focused on life being ordered and thoughts being perfect, for them being in control to a certain extent. Larger degree of controversy of personality disorders. We already talked about sleep disorders the other day, like insomnia, narcolepsy. Sleep-like disorders with breathing-related disorders. So sleep problems occur in 3 parts of the brain: brain, upper airways, or lungs. Brain regulates the respiratory center of the lungs in the medulla oblongata. The central sleep apnea is central part of the brain. Sleep at night. Apnea affects the airway. So, look for apnea without obstruction. Looks at 5 plus apnea hours during. Problems with brain control for ventilation. Chinese stroke breathing is considered then diasternal breathing followed by the stop in breathing. Knowing the breathing patterns, inhales and exhales change from normal fixation. Believed heart failure, stroke, renal is the cause. Okay. Upper airways, obstruction from the mouth to the lungs. Obstructive sleep when airways are obstructed. Soft tissue around our neck can relax at night and potentially cause obstruction to the airflow for a certain period of time. At nighttime, this causes snoring, gasping, or pausing in breathing. At daytime, people are tired, sleepy, and unrefreshed. Diagnosed by a sleep study and looks for 15 apneas per hour. Lungs or chest wall stops lungs from being able to expand. Hypoventilation disorder. When we are not able to ventilate our lungs fully and remove all CO2, results in a buildup of CO2 and decrease in CO2. Can occur due to medication that represses respiratory function. If there's a problem with lungs or chest. High CO2 can cause right side heart failure. Low O2 can affect all organs. So we talked about reward pathway, drug dependence, and obesity tolerance, and substance use disorder. We all talked about those. Biological basis of Alzheimer's disease. We kind of already talked about this, but we can dive into it. Most common order of dementia category is a neurocognitive disorder, loss of cognitive function. Memories also decrease, but normal motor functions are fine till late stage when they lost basic activities of daily living. Toilets, eating, bathing. Cause of disease is limited. Brain tissue can be decreased in size, significantly showed up atrophy. It's a cerebellum that's often dramatically decreased in size. Severity of atrophy correlates with severity of dementia. Starts in temporal lobes, important for memory. Later, atrophy spreads to parietal and frontal lobes. Many other cognitive functions. Under microscope, three main abnormalities. Loss of neurons, plaques are made of beta amyloids. Occurs in space between cells outside of the neurons and entangles. Located inside neurons. Group of neurons are a base of the cerebrum called the nucleus basalis is often lost early in Alzheimer's. Associated with acetylcholine, which contributes to the cognitive function of disease. Synapses appear to not function clearly long before disease. It can be caused through genetic mutations, which involves production of amyloid protein. Also, APOE4 is involved in metabolism of fats, so it's strongly related, but also high blood pressure. Parkinson's is low dopamine. So, dopamine, Parkinson's, involves motor abnormalities, mental dysfunction like shakiness, like abnormal walking, poor balance. Muscles are stiff and slow with tremor. Later in disease are severe. Patients may not be able to care for themselves. Brains of patients have abnormalities visible to naked eye and brainstem. It's related to dopamine neurons. Motor abilities relate to loss of dopaminergic neurons. When they have low dopamine in the brain, it causes Parkinson's. Under the microscope, we can see diseased neurons which are degenerating. Often contains Lewy bodies, which are abnormal structures inside dopaminergic neurons. The Lewy bodies contain a protein called alpha-synuclein, a normal protein present in the brain under normal, but they clump together. So, Parkinson is Lewy body. Risk factors for Parkinson's is genetic mutations that is found in some families with inherited form of disease. I swear we talked about depressive major disorder already. But okay. Let's go through it real quickly. Depression, a major depressive disorder characterized by prolonged feelings of helplessness, disorder about the future. Depressive disorder has the following: has physical and emotional component, sadness, plus sig, E-caps. Suicide, interest, guilt, energy, conception, appetite, psychomotor, sleep. The only reason people reach out for mental health is it's considered the common cold of mental illness. The three factors for depression is the biopsychosocial model, the biologist's genetic components. Depression is super complicated with the 5-HTLPR gene associated with depression, but only if individuals in a stressful environment. They have decreased risk for depression if they have low stress environment. Decreased activation in the prefrontal cortex, lower activation in the reward pathway. Psychological factors are learned helplessness from behaviorist theory, that they have no control over their life or environment. Cognitive theory, which cognitive distortions getting trapped in a negative thought pattern, and attribution theory. They have a negative attribution theory where they're people vulnerable to depression. Individual depression like negative experiences, internal causes. They think negative experiences will continue to occur in the future. Example, a friend doesn't call you back, you start thinking it's because you're unlikable. You start thinking this will happen in the future, and also another friend doesn't like you. Or pessimist attributes more likely. Coping style and self-esteem might also have to do with depression. Social culture environments is co-rumination and empathy. Having a friend partner with depression can increase likelihood of individuals around you getting depression. Might be due to people talking about problems and negatives impact on them. Low social status, such as losing a job or struggling to keep a job, has a high risk of development. Social isolation and child abuse, internalizing a prejudice, higher link of depression. Dependent stressors, depressed persons will be expected to experience a greater number of stressful lights. Independent stressor occurs without a person's influence equal amount. Depression and bipolar disorder. Bipolar is very related to depression. Bipolar disorder refers to manic depressive disorder. Bipolar disorder is a condition where someone swings from extreme emotional highs to extreme emotional lows. Individuals with bipolar disorder will have periods of depression and periods of mania. Mania is that high optimism, high energy, high self-esteem, euphoria, poor judgment, poor decision-making, risky behavior. Mania acronym is DIG fast. Distractibility, insomnia, gradus, fleeting thoughts, agitation, speech, thoughtless. Hypomania is mild forms of mania and sometimes not that bad. Loss of energy and not need to sleep, so you get lots of work done. You also feel good, creativity. So a hypomanic episode is a period that's less than 4 days, and it does not require hospitalization, while a manic episode lasts longer than 7 days and tends to be functioning and requires hospitalization. Bipolar 1 disorder is when hypomania becomes manic without a major depressive. Individual with bipolar 2 has never had a manic episode. Although it's possible for individuals diagnosed with bipolar 1 to never experience hypomania, it's extremely unlikely. Bipolar 2 disorder, it's when hypomania plus one major depressive episode. So think two things. And cyclothymic disorder is hypomania plus dysauthymia. And then we can start social psychology. But how long have we been going? We've been going for 43 minutes. Let's see. I could stop here, but I think I should keep going. Let's stop on page... Oh my god, this is a long section. We can stop on page 191. That's a lot, though. How about this? I'll keep going until I feel like I'm burnt out and I'm not learning that as well anymore. So, I think we should keep going. Conformity and groupthink. Okay, so psychopsychology is how individuals think, feel, and behave in social interactions, and how people act differently in groups than individually. Conformity is peer pressure. Conformity is peer pressure and tendency for people to bring behavior in line with group norms. Powerful in social situations. We use social situations to determine what is accepted. So let's think conformity is individuals trying to conform to the group's decision, so peer pressure. This is why it's important for people to have positive peers. If group behavior is positive, then there's likely to be peace. Negative peers equals negative peer cause catastrophic behaviors. Why do people conform to group norms even when behaviors are negative and wrong? Imagine you're being part of a group asked to train a dog. Groups decide to train with a shock collar and you agree. Why do you agree? There's two reasons why you agree to conform to a group. Informative influence. So informative influence looks to a group for guidance when you don't know what to do and you assume the group is correct. You never interacted with a dog before and you're uncertain about how to train a dog and you're uncertain if it's an appropriate method to use a shock collar. You look for a group for guidance and you assume they are correct. That makes sense. Maybe it's something you don't have any knowledge on, so you look at the group for background information. Normative influence. Even if you know what's right, do what the group's negative actions to avoid social rejection. So normative is you're trying to join the group's behavior so you don't be considered rejected from the group. You're expert group trainer and you know it's easier to train the dog with treats than with a shock. Even though you know that training a dog with a shock collar is incorrect, you may still decide to go with the group to avoid social outcast. There's two different ways a person can conform, publicly or privately. If you privately conform, you change behaviors and opinions to align with a group. If you privately conform, change behaviors and opinions to align with a group. If you privately conform to a shock collar, you would leave the situation with a general belief that the best way. If you publicly conform, you're outward changing, but inside you maintain your core conformation. You can outwardly agree with the group, but internally you agree that treats is the best decision. So, private confirmation can be like cults. Public confirmation is like disagreeing with groups, but you just follow their behavior. Alright. Problem solving and decision making often takes place in groups. Factor that influence individual problem solving is that group interactions shape the outcome. Group polarization is a phenomenon group decision may amplifies the original decision of the group. A stronger version of a decision is adopted. So example is like jury individuals increase the death penalty. For a viewpoint that influence group final decision making, all the views do not have equal influence. Viewpoints is shared by major members of the group. Arguments made that tend to favor the popular group and a criticism directed toward confirmation bias. So, group members seek out information that supports the major view. Okay, groupthink. Groupthink occurs when maintaining harmony among group members is more important than carrying an outstanding problem at hand. Happens in very cohesive insulated groups, often important respected leaders in a group of unity to express their own thoughts. So groupthink is like cult members wanting to keep in line with their group members, even though it's not helping solve the problem at hand. First suggestion proposed by leaders adopted, especially if there's a little hope finding a better solution. Example, neighborhood people decide to meet to discuss a dog exhibiting bad behavior. Leader says the dog should be put down to avoid damage to the neighborhood. Instead of arguing with the leader and having conflict, the neighbors agree that the dog should be put down. To avoid groupthink, bring in outsiders and experts. Have a leader of the group. Not. It's a good idea to make note of. MCAT conformity, groupthink, conformity, group polarization, and groupthink are all processes where individuals come together in a group. Can be positive. Group is open-minded or negative. Conformity and obedience refer to difference but related to things. So conformity is peer pressure and how we adjust our behaviors to match a group. Can be positive. Example, if you see a bunch of people running out of a building that you're about to enter, you probably conform to this behavior and run away as well. can lead to negative, in a teenager, peer pressure can lead to negative behavior. So if your friend jumped off a building, would you too? Yeah. So, obedience is described how we follow orders, obey authority with no cognitive component. So, like, just following orders. You're following someone's orders that have higher authority over you. Can be positive. Firefighter tells you not to enter because it's on fire. You probably be acknowledged authority and obey. Negative norm people commit such negative acts during the Holocaust due to obedience. So it's both negative and positive effects. Both conformity and obedience can be positive or negative in the effects of social behavior in society. We can conform and obey in little ways as well. If we obey traffic laws or agree that cereal is a breakfast, we don't question it. Excuse me. Social anonymity is a breakdown of social bonds between individual and community, a situation in which society does not have a support or firm collective consciousness. Social anonymity can also result in social groups disbanding and alienation from social groups. To resolve social anomalies, social norms must be strengthened and groups must be redeveloped to shared norms. Associated with functional theoretic paradigm in society, the concept of anomaly describes the alienation of the field when social norms and social bonds are breaking. Without attachment to society, people experience purposelessness and aimlessness. Another type of conformity and obedience is compliance, identification, and internalization. Compliance is situations where we do behavior to get reward or avoid behavior. So if you're complying to follow the law, we're getting a reward of not going to jail. Compliance refers to a change of behavior that is requested by another person. Yes. Compliance is the tend to agree to do what is requested, especially when there's certain factors present, a feeling that is given and taken. Believable. Robert studied how sales marketing results in consumer compliance. For example, soft drink labels have long used celebrities to increase compliance. The rich and the consumer would buy the drink because they liked the celebrity, soon as the celebrity approved of it. Example, paying taxes. I would get punished if I don't pay taxes. TSA screening. Nobody likes it, but you won't be allowed on the plane if you don't. Alright, identification. When people act and dress a certain way to like someone that they respect. Will do this as long as they maintain respect for that individual. According to Freud, a children's development, it could be a time in which the child must adopt to the characteristics of one of their parents. During the process of identification, the children adopts the characters of the same-sex parent and begins to associate themselves with a copy of their behavior. Freud and his superego again. We already know this. It's basically just adopting someone's behavior if you have respect. Internalization. Oh, my bad. Internalization is the idea, belief, behavior that has been integrated into our own values. We conform to the belief privately, strongly than other types of conformity. Remember, privately confirmation is you accept it as fact. While others, public is you agree with the group but you don't. You have your own opinion. Sam will start to go to the gym to comply with friends, but then might internalize exercise is good for you and continue the behavior. Yeah, that's a good example. Can conform due to different types of social influence, pressure that we feel from these around us. Known as social influence. If we do something to gain respect, support from peers, we comply with social norms because this might go through group outwardly, but internal belief something's different. For example, friends are obsessed with a certain singer. You tell the group you like the singer as well, even if you absolutely hate him or her. You continue to say it, or even go to the singer's concert. Information, social influence. We conform because we feel others more knowledgeable than us, because we think they know something we don't. Example, when you move to a new place, you would ask people around you who lived there for a long time. places to eat. And just go along with the suggestions. Let's talk about the Ash conformity studies. One of the famous conformity studies, Soul Ash was part of a group known as the Gestalt Psychologists. Is this the occult principles guide from earlier in the sensations section? Maybe. Believe not possible to understand human by breaking it down into parts. People must be understood as a whole. Okay. Most social acts have to be understood in their studying, and lost meaning is if isolated. No error in thinking about social facts is more serious, but the failure of seeing their place and function. Holocaust influenced Ash's studies of conformity. Was interested in studying how group behavior can influence behavior as an individual, with what aspects of group behavior is most important. Participants study many other participants too. What? The experiment explains a boring experiment to you. He holds up a card. The experimenter explains a boring experiment to you. He holds up a card on a target line with 3 comparison lines. The person needs to figure out which comparison line matches the target line. This occurs 18 times. 12 trials where the converts get wrong, 6 are where the correct answer. I don't even know what this is talking about right now. We should review this, even though it's probably low yield. So, the first trial, each participant, everyone gives what is obvious is right answer. Second trial, same occurrence, error wrong 1%. Third trial, answer remains just as obvious, but the participants give the wrong answer. Second group then gives the same wrong answer. The study found 70% of participants give the wrong answer and conform to the wrong answer at least once, and 37 conform every single time the group does. Experiments, other participant groups were Confederates. Actors told what to do, are able to do what the experimenter told. The purpose was to determine if the real test participant would go along with the other group Confederates' incorrect decisions. No actual pressure to conform, no prize for conforming to the size, and no punishments for not conforming. Perceived pressure to conform. Why did the individuals conform? After the study, were asked why they conform. Example of normative social influence. So, it's just in talking about all the details that we talked about earlier. Finally, some persons made a perceptual error, where they truly believed answer given by others was correct. They were consciously aware of any dissonance in the judgment. But some of the parts not conform, after studying non-conforming, were asked why did they not conform. Some were really confident, really sure their answer was correct, and others were wrong. Others were not confident. Validity. Do the conditions of the study mimic those of the real world? Maybe. Line and lab does not the same in the real world. Demand characteristics describes how participants change behavior to match expectations of experimenters. Still, 75% of individuals conform with no pressure. How much more power would experiment be with pressure, reward, punisher, if your friends were the Confederates? Events that inspired the Milgram study of obedience. Alright. One of the most famous studies in conforming and obedience are the Milgram studies. Studies began in 1961, important because often studies are conducted in response to something. In this case, in response to the Holocaust, Pilgrim parents have immigrated from Europe, were Jewish. Pilgrim were born in the U.S. but deeply affected by the Holocaust. I should have been born in the German-speaking Jewish community of Prague and died in the gas chamber 20 years later. I came to be born in Bronx, how will I never understand? Pilgrim was affected by the trials of Nazis. Ekman acknowledged he was the one who did this and didn't feel guilty of the consequences. The world now understands the concept of death murder. You know that one doesn't need to be fanatical, sadistic, or mentally ill to murder millions. That is enough to be a loyal follower. You're going to do one's duty. Many Nazi officers as German followers, Eichmann said they were just following orders. Everyday people could commit horrendous acts under certain situations. Pilgrim wanted to know if everyday people, can be made to follow orders like the Nazis. Can a normal person be made to do harm on an innocent individual just because of authority figure? It is as simple as they're evil, we are good. I don't know what's going on. Okay, the Milgram experiment on obedience. I thought we just talked about this. Oh, the events that in the inspired. Okay, so this is the actual event. This other content above is what promoted them to think about obedience due to World War II. Okay, so this is the actual study. Milgram studies were done to study the willingness of participants, average Americans, to obey authority figures that instruct them to perform behaviors that conflict with their personal beliefs. Okay, deceived study participants in order to recruit participants. Posted ads about recruiting people to a study on memory and learning. The purpose was to get everyday people. When participants arrived at the labs, participants were told the study they were participating in was going to be looking at the effects of punishment on memory and learning. People learn best after being punished or making a mistake. In the study, there was an experimenter, one Confederate on the study participant, and another real participant. Between the two experimenters, they randomly decided who was going to be the learner and who was going to be the teacher. Not so random, the Confederate always got learner role, and the real experiment got the teacher. Learner was hooked to a number of electrodes and told that the teacher will teach the learner a number of words. Then the learner would be shocked whenever they gave the wrong answer. In some versions, the learner noted that they were worried about the experiment because of the heart condition. The experiment told them not to worry, that the shocks would be painful but not dangerous. Oh my god. This study's kind of crazy. Kind of goes hard with on ethics here. Teacher was taken to a different room without visual contact with learner and sat in front of a shock box. Shock box had switches that would shock the experiment at 15 volts. And then switches increase in increment up to 450 volts. Switches also labeled from slight shock, moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock. Teacher then instructed to read a list of word pairs. They are told to read the first word of each pair and then offer 4 possible pair words. The learner would indicate their answer by pressing a button that would display to the teacher. Whenever the learner made error, the teacher was instructed to give shocks to increase increments with each wrong answer. No actual shocks were given, even though the teacher thought so. After giving some correct answers, the learner started giving incorrect answers, which were determined by experiment beforehand. So the first coup shocks, the learner would not elicit much of a reaction. After the first, the learner would not. So increasing shocks, the learner would cry out in pain and pound out on the wall. Also, after some shocks would start complaining about their heart condition. Shocks continued to yell and scream they wanted to quit. Finally, all response from the learner would cease and only silence. Teacher instruction continued by the experiment when teacher looked at the experiment for guidance. Experiment told teacher, please continue. Experiment required that you can continue. It's absolutely essential that you continue. You have no choice. You must go on. The experiment stopped when teacher had 4 verbal protests about the study or when they gave a 450 shock 3 times. Jesus Christ. Kind of messed up experiment. Before experiment, Milgram asked professor in clinical psychology if the teachers would obey the commands. Said that most teachers would stop once the learner protests, and that very, very few people would shock all the way. That those that did were probably psychopaths. Jesus. When results of the study came out, the results were very disturbing. 65% shocked all the way. The teachers had protested and were trembling, but still obeyed commander and shocked to 450. A version experiment where the learner claimed to have a heart condition complained that the shocks were hurting their heart. Compliance shocked very little to 63. Everyday Americans heard the cries of people they were tormenting continued with the test. Very few people resisted authority. Wow, okay. So obedience has a very strong ability to promote someone to adhere to a behavior. That's what I'm getting from this study. I set up a simple experiment at Yale's University to test how much pain an ordinary citizen would inflict on another person simply because he was ordered to by an experimental study. Study authority is pitted against the subject, strongly more interpreters against hurting others, with the subject ears ringing with screams of the victims. Authority won more often than not. Extreme willingness of adults to go almost any length of command to authorities is the chief finding of the study, and in fact most urgently demanding explanations. Ordinary people simply do their jobs, and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agents in a terrible destructive process. Moreover, even when the destructive effects of their work become patiently clear, when they were asked to carry out actions incompatible with fundamental standards of morality, relatively few people had resources needed to resist authority. So it shows that authority has a high cause on impacting behavior. So what can we learn from Milgram's experiment? One of the most famous psychological studies, regular everyday people will comply with authority even if it goes against their own morals and harming others. Study has been replicated and results remain same. No matter what country and time period, location, full compliance always hosted around 61 to 61%. Study was perceived to be unethical today in the time too, and at the time too in the 1960s. Milgram was denied tenure at Harvard and kept from entering lots of academic institutions with negative perceptions around the environment. Wow. Things we should avoid. Many participants really felt ashamed about what they had done, but even ashamed participants tend to speak poorly of the victims. He wouldn't have been shocked if he answered correctly. The just world phenomenon, which is the idea that the universe is fair so people must get what they deserve. Believe good things happen to good people and vice versa. So people use this to justify their actions. Also, many participants were conformed by passing responsive actions on to others. Like, when experiments said they take full responsibility, participants were not responsible for the harm. Participants felt more comfortable. I'll just follow orders seen in other atrocities. Is there a way we can stop this from happening, stop us from avoiding in these controversial situations? Be aware of the just world phenomenon and try stopping ourselves from making judgments on people being in situations they are. For example, stop thinking that people are poor because they didn't do well in school, didn't work hard enough, and didn't care enough. Stop believing in the just world phenomenon. Remind ourselves to take responsibility for our own actions, avoid placing blame on others. Stop the passing responsibility to others. Often causing ourselves against self-serving bias. That we can never commit acts like this because apparently in the right situation most of us would. Fundamental attribution error focuses on only an action of others. Tendency to believe that others in outgroups behave in a certain way based on inherent personality flaws. Ideas of attributing character too strongly to explain another group's actions. Real takeaway of the study: how easy it is to think others are atrocious and evil, while people like us would only perform evil acts because they're misguided. Truth is, we're all misguided, all susceptible to authorities in a way that many of us would find upsetting. Important to have compassion for all people. Victims and aggressors don't know how to act in this place. Constantly be skeptical if you hear, I was doing my job just following orders. Try not to fall into that trap. So, we're gonna look at the Stanford prison study, the Stanford prison experiment. I have heard about this one and their obedience in role playing in my general psychology in high school. So, the final of the three studies on conformity and obedience. Study was conducted in 1971. The purpose was how conformity obedience can result in acts different from usual, contrary to how they think they would act. The answer is complicated. In certain situations, many can otherwise ordinary people behave in strange ways. Goal: how social and convention can influence behaviors on participants playing the role of prisoner and guards. Prisoner and guards got so caught up in the roles that they did not stop the experiment early. That they had to stop the experiment early. Participants knew all about the study, no physical or physiological deception, and participants were normal. Male, middle class universities with no medical issues. His students randomly assigned to guards or prisoners. All knew the assignment was random. Had participants and prisoners arrested at unexpected times on random days. Prisoners treated as prisoners from the start, and the prison had no windows and clocks, so it became an environment different from the outside world. Prisoners were fingerprint handcuffed and numbered after arrest. Also met with guards and told them they were not supposed to physically harm prisoners, but could create fear and loss of privacy loss or control loss of individuality. They were given uniforms, batons, and sunglasses. Instructors referred to prisoners by numbers and not names. Guards can do anything to maintain except for physical harm to participants. Day 1 is uneventful. The prisoner began to rebel against guardians. Guards had to decide what to do. Day 2, early prisoner rebellion against, and some prisoners remained in their cells. Guards fought back against prisoner actions because it was dangerous to their authority. Prisoners cursed at guards, as some guards began to see actual prisoners as dangerous prisoners that needed to be controlled. Guards used fire extinguishers on them and forced them to strip down. Guards regained some control, and rebelling prisoners were put in a closet in solitary confinement. Closet only big enough to stand, but they couldn't lie down or sit. After 36 hours, prisoners began to break down, literally. One prisoner started to mentally break down. Depression, uncontrollable rage, screamed, cried, and yelled. Not the only prisoner who had mental breakdowns, he was just the first. Day 3, situation went even further. Participants went on hunger strike. In response, guards forced the prisoners to repeat their numbers over and over again. Exercise, withheld bathroom privileges, and other basic amenities, and tried to make prisoners turn on each other and break them down. Day 4, continued escalation. Day 5, same. Day 6, Zimbardo had involved himself as a prison warden. Strauss never realized things had gone wrong. His girlfriend Mazlek visited prison, and so upset by what she saw, she made him stop the experiment. His girlfriend is how Zimbardo was brought back to reality. Zimbardo then ended the study. By the time half the prisoners already left from breakdowns, no guards had left. Jesus. So a closer look at the Stanford prison experiment. Before the experiment, all prisoners were similar, same background, college students, middle class, no physical or psychological conditions. Prisoners did not band together usually. They were pretty distrustful of each other. The prisoners saw each other as informants. Guards didn't encourage solitary, but tend to reward those that saw a good prisoner by giving privilege such as food. By giving privilege to some inmates and not others, guards broke solidarity of prisoners. Some released early due to emotional trauma, but none of the prisoners just stopped and left the experiment, even though they were told at the beginning of the experiment that they could. Why? Maybe it was a misunderstanding. They convinced each other to stay. Or maybe they didn't want to give up money they were going to get for engaging. These prisoners were just volunteered who had left. Why did the guards act so poorly towards the prisoners? The guards thought the prisoners were wimps, troublemakers, or faking distress. Many thought their behavior was not too extreme and placed blame on the behavior on prisoners. None of the guards left the study, and some were upset that the study ended early. Okay. The influence situation can have on our behavior might be due to situational attribution or dispositional attribution. It becomes more easier to behave badly towards individuals who suffer de-inhibition and loss of self. In this case, prisoners forced to dress the same and address as number. Bad behavior causes cognitive dissonance, which we talked about earlier, which guards knowing their behavior was inappropriate try to reduce their mental distress by cognitive dissonance reduction. Or they justify the behavior everything happened because prisoners were wimps or deserved it. There's also internalization. Participants internalize their role as prison role. Prisoners incorporate their role into beliefs and let it influence their attitudes, cognition, and behaviors. Many problems with the study. Zimbardo himself played a role in the prison warden to observe behavior's output, but by doing so he compromised his objective as a non-neutral observer. He's so involved that he passively allowed a lot of unethical behavior. Why didn't stop? He himself thought they were faking it to get released. Also, according to scientific methodology, this wasn't a good experiment. What were these operant definitions? Dependent, independent variables. What was being manipulated? What was being measured? What were the controls? So small sample size, different results if other people were involved. Can't replicate, so hardly to know. Also a good example of demand characteristics of how much behavior was influenced by how these experiments wanted to know to behave consciously. Possibly that all participants are acting in the way that Zimbabwe wanted to act. Also could have had a selection bias. No deception in study, so to study students willing to sign up to be prisoner for 2 weeks. Overall, this criticism don't discredit its results. The results of the study line up with other social conforming obedience or stricter methodology. Alright. Factors that influence conformity and obedience. Are there factors that make someone more likely to conform? Or there's internal factors that cause someone to change how they think? External factors can cause someone to do things that have nothing to do with the person. So group size is more likely to form in groups of 3 to 5. Humanity is when opinions are unanimous, and also in the there's one supporter who answered correctly before the experiment. Full compliance of the group dropped from 3 to 7 to 5. Individuals claim that the response of the supporter influenced their response. They said they didn't. Shows the supporter showed reduced likelihood of conformity. We're not aware of the effect a defector can have. Group status, why children are more likely to go along with a popular group. Why we trust doctors over Fort Gardeners about our health. Group cohesion, if we feel no contact with the group, feel less need to go along with the group. Observed behavior, while we believe our behavior is observed. In Ashton, when the participant came in late, they said his response would be recorded on paper and not shared with the group. The group in Ashton's line was not shared with the group. The experiment was much less likely to conform. Public response, we think it might be accepted with acceptance and shunning. Happy to conform if they met with shunning. Happy not to conform if we will be met with acceptance. Internal factors such as prior commitments. If we say something earlier that goes against the group, will decrease conformity because we are less likely to say something different later. Feelings of insecurity, more likely to follow judgment of others. Likely someone will obey following orders without question. Obedience, in order to prevent negative consequences for disobeying. Closeness to authority gives orders. More likely to accept orders from someone who we respect. Physical proximity, more likely to compel with someone who we are close to. In milligram, when authority is standing close by behind the experiment, they are more likely to obey. So, I forgot about the Milgram, even though I just read about it. God. So the Milgram experiment was crazy. The Milgram was the shocking one. Legitimacy of authority, if we're wearing a lab coat, carrying a clipboard, we're more likely to be obeyed. Institutional authority, while respected university, expected that the place won't give you a harmful command. Victim distance, in the original Milgram study, teachers couldn't see learner. If we see participant reduce likelihood, we obey experiment, but still don't stop everyone. Depersonalization, when leaner victims made to seem less human through stereotypes. Role models of deficiency, we're likely to disobey when we see others doing the same. No one types of personality makes someone more susceptible to authority, but people's moods can have an effect. Those with rough days are less likely. But people's moods can have an effect. Those with a rough day, less likely to conform. Status and culture can play a role than those of low socioeconomic status. People conform all the time, like going to school or eating cereal for breakfast. These are reasons why ordinary people can do terrible things, but knowing these can reduce the negative outcomes. Just one non-conformer can make others not conform as well. Got it. So we got the bystanders, social facilitation, and then agents of socialization. And then I'm taking a break. I will, because I am getting burnt out. So, the bystander effect. So imagine a person falling to the ground nearby. Would you help? People say yes, but research says no. If in a group, less likely to help. With increased group size, people feel less inclined to take action, called the bystander effect. Bystander effect, individuals may feel less inclined to take action because of the presence of others in the group. So I remembered this from my reading. Bystander effect refers to a group present in which individuals observe an injustice or a crime being perpetrated and do not intervene. Small group equals less bystander effect. Large group equals more bystander effect. Leads to nothing happen by and might not call 911. Why? One may be lack of medical knowledge or limited experience in assistance and thinks someone else would do it. Someone has more. It's called the diffusion responsibility theory. Diffusion responsibility explains the bystander effect. When individuals are in presence of others where help is needed, feel less per person responsible and less likely to take action when needed. In a small group, you don't diffuse the responsibility. You're more likely to feel a personal response to intervene. Example, a small group, you might realize you are the only one who has practiced CPR. Amplified by the amount of people in the group, you were to collapse in a small group, less chance of bystander. If only a few people, more likely the people more inclined to take action. Feel more personal responsible. Bystander effect can lead to little happening by any individual. One example is the story of Kitty Genosa. Okay? 28-year-old woman in New York who was stabbed, raped, robbed while 30 people were vicinity witnesses. Vicinity witnesses? Horrific attack spanned over half an hour. Kitty was pleading for help and the victim later returned to kill her. The witness didn't take action because there were so many people present in the vicinity. Wow, that's crazy. De-individuation is those in a group are more likely to act inappropriately because the crowd conceals personal identity. Good example is behavior or some on Black Friday. Presence of a large group there is violence. Presence of a large group decreases their inhibition and guilt. So they feel less individual and that they can conform to a society. So, promote deviant behavior. Okay, interesting. That's crazy about this Kitty Genovese story, that the bystander effect is that strong. Social facilitation and social loathing. Social facilitation is how would presence of others affect your behavior. Would it help or hinder your performance? According to social facilitation, most dominant response for a particular behavior would be shown. Dominant response refers to the response most likely to occur. In the example of a presentation, if you practice inside and out, presence of others will lead you to perform well. If you haven't practiced well, presence of others will make you perform more poorly. Social facilitation occurs when individuals perform better in front of a crowd. Occurs when an individual completes a manageable test in front of the audience. When an individual works on the challenging test in front of the audience, this might increase arousal beyond optimal and interferes with performance. Presence of others increases your arousal. Your general physical and your general physiological or psychological excitement, such as increased heart rate, faster breathing, activation of the autonomous nervous system, known as nervous energy. Whether the dominant response is correct or accurate depends on how easy the task is, and how you learned it and rehearsed it. Presence of others improve performance on simple tasks and hinder in difficult tasks. It's known as the Yerski-Donson law, which we talked about earlier. Increased arousal occurs when person efforts are evaluated. If you're giving a presentation to close friends who are not evaluating, you may not have any nervous energy because you feel comfortable around them. Social loathing. Oh, sorry. So this is a diagram showing that Yerkes-Dodson law. That if you have low energy, you'll have performed worse. If you have too much energy, arousal, you'll perform even worse as well. So you want that minimal optimal arousal. So, social loathing is the tendency to put forth less effort in a group task. So if you think about it, it's that individual that doesn't contribute that much to a group project. And they tend to put as minimal effort into the group project as much. So group production reduction of individuals effect. Group experience social loafing are less productive, put forth less effort and perform poorly. Perhaps to guard against being a person who's doing all the work, or because you know that individual contributors are not evaluated. Example, in a group project of a presentation, put less effort and perform poorly. Can be reduced by making tasks more difficult or separating performance of individual in the group, or make individual components of each group. So does the presence of others help or hinder performance? Depends. The Hawthorne effect is a typical... Oh. Sorry, brain fart. Haven't heard about this effect. Hawthorne also observed the observer effect as a typical reactivity when individuals modify or improve expected behavior in response to awareness of being observed. So, I remember a practice round was talking about the Hawthorne effect of when these group of students changed their behavior when they saw that, like, a researcher was observing them. So, acronym observe the thorn. Observe the thorn. The Hawthorne effect occurs when an individual changes his or her behavior, especially due to awareness being observed. Yes. So, the Hawthorne effect, the change of behavior when you're being observed. Agents of socialization. For the parts of society that are important for socialization, the process of learning the norms and values in society. Socialization is a lifelong process. Lifelong process is what we learn how to interact with others. Everything we consider to be normal is actually learned through socialization. How we learn to walk, talk, feed ourselves, behavior, norms. So important agents of socialization. What's used to transmit culture, values, beliefs about acceptance, behaviors, and beliefs. Agents include people, organizations, institutions that help others learn about our world. Examples of agents such as popular culture, family, religion. Our family is the most important agent of socialization. When you're a child, total dependence on others to survive. Your parents teach you how to care for yourself, how close relationships work, their beliefs, and how to talk to others. Malcolm book Outlier looks at how families play a role in socialization, how wealthy parents raise kids versus less fortunate to raise children. One example is the trip to doctor office. Wealthy parents encourage to ask questions about kids, less fortunate unlikely to criticize doctor. Wealthy kids encouraged to challenge authority, while less wealthy kids taught to listen to authorities. So it shows us how kids are raised and how it affects their interactions. School is important. Okay. School teaches life lessons along with science and math. It doesn't learn don't learn from the academic curriculum, but learn social skills from interactions. We learn the importance of obeying authority. Acts interests is part of the hidden curriculum. Hidden curriculum is the standard behaviors that deemed acceptable that are seldom taught by teachers. Hidden curriculum, standard behaviors that are deemed acceptable that are taught by teachers. So, behaving in class is basically a hidden curriculum. Not cutting your friend's shirt. Hidden curriculum. So, peers teach us to develop our social behaviors. Peer values and behaviors contradict values of our at times influence us. Peer pressure is an example. How our values of peers influence us. We must decide what values to keep and what values to get rid of. Example, peer pressures us to drink or do drugs as a teenager. What movie to listen to. So that's also influence on our behavior. Then mass media. Mass media is television, internet, radio, books. When you're young, you learn things through mass media that parents would not approve of. Today, children are exposed to a lot of content intended for mature audience, violent TV shows, enforced gender, other stereotypes. Example, children's books is another agent of socialization. So, that's what we'll end for now. On page 191 of the normative and non-normative behaviors. So,